Hello, everybody. Today we have Crystal, who's here to talk to us about being agile and which type of agile. So I'm just going to take a minute or so to read Crystal's bio. Crystal Richards has over 20 years of experience as a project manager and a trainer. Crystal is a certified project management professional, an agile certified practitioner, a certified scrum master, and is certified in emotional intelligence. She's dedicated to bringing out the best in people, having served with multiple organizations as a trainer and mentor. Crystal is also an adjunct faculty with the University of Maryland. Crystal is a recent convert of Agile, putting into practice the Scrum framework in her work and trainings over the last 5 years. In fact, Crystal is using Scrum to work on her latest project, which is writing a PMP exam prep book that is scheduled for release in early 2024. So look out for that. So today I'm asking all of y'all, I know you're in completely different time zones, so it's good morning, good afternoon, and maybe evening somewhere. So sit back, relax, and get ready to be on Crystal's Agile journey and talking to us about what Agile certifications are out there. And just to note, Akin will be co-hosting or co-emceeing with me throughout the session. So hold your question and answers till later. Unless it's something that's burning that you need to know right away, then I guess Crystal might be able to address it. But now, Crystal, over to you. Akin and I will drop out and be in the background.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Thanks so much for that introduction, Shavian. It is a pleasure. Early morning for me in the East Coast in the Washington, D.C. area of the U.S. I'm excited to share with you about kind of my assessment, my perspective, and maybe hopefully help for you and guidance for you. I'm trying to figure out which Agile makes sense because I get that question all the time. But you probably want to know a little bit, why are people asking you, Crystal? But before I do, I want to know where you all are coming from. So this is hitting out right out the gate using Mentimeter. So if you have access to Mentimeter, please put it in the Mentimeter platform. Where in the world are you? So tell me the country, or if you are representing the US, tell me what state. Don't tell me what city, because geography's project management is what I know. Geography, So I'd love to see where people, all right, United Kingdom, West Sussex. I have a little country accent. My family's from like the South of the US. So if I say things a little awkward, that's just my family roots there. All right. So we've got London, Belfast, Northern Ireland, Sao Paulo, Brazil. Love it. Italy, Greece. All right. So anybody from the US? Oh, New Jersey, Frank. So if you're not able to use Mentimeter, you can certainly put it in the chat. Hook me up, Shavian. Anybody putting stuff in the chat about where they're from? All right, I'm going to say silence is like, no, they're not. Chicago, all right. Yep. Awesome.
There are a lot in the chat.
Okay, too fast to keep up.
Yeah.
All right, well, this is great. It's nice to see the representation. It's also great that I put in my disclaimer that's coming up, because it will kind of give you a sense and wrap your arms around where I'm coming from with my perspective. So why are people asking me about different Agile certifications? Well, as your presenter this week, today, I am an PMP and PMI ACP bootcamp trainer. So people do come to me from that perspective as an educational consultant around what are some of the certifications that are out there. I'm a business owner. I am what I lovingly call a misfit project manager. So I'm not I don't know if it's typical anymore, but when project management was still kind of getting recognition, it was IT or construction. I don't do any of those things. I am a business process improvement. I work in hospitals and healthcare systems because they need some project management help and assistance as well, and definitely from a training aspect. And I always love this last bullet point that I have here, is that I'm a Xennial. So Xennial is the generation of folks who aren't Generation X, but we're not quite millennials. So we're right in there where we were born in the late 70s to early 80s. And the saying goes is that we grew up with an analog life. So I learned how to, read a clock with hands. But my adulthood is a digital life. I got my first email account when I was in college, some 5 years ago. So this is a case of I had to grow up I'm still kind of like fighting sometimes the technology. And then when it works for me, I love it. So that's what I'm all about as Zennial. And as a business owner, my company is MindSpark, where I train people to be better project managers so that they can lead their projects with clarity, courage, and confidence. Those are kind of my 3 pillars of what it's all about for me when it comes to training people. So I have a couple more questions just to kind of gauge more about who's in the audience. So first question for you is, tell me, what is your Agile experience? Do you have no exposure, no experience? Some of the terms, I already have my certification, Crystal. I'm just curious to know a little bit more of others that are out there. So this is good for me to find out. All right, we've got some expert folks in here. So I was actually expecting a few people with no Agile experience. And I know you're probably thinking, well, that's just silly. I cannot tell you how many times I have taught my PMP bootcamp classes and I ask the same question and I get pretty much half of my class. Awesome. Thank you for being candid there, that one dot there. But half of my classes, sometimes even 3/4 of my classes, people will admit that they're in the no Agile experience. But as we go through the course, I actually reveal to them that they've been doing Agile, just like when we learn project management, PMP project management, or Prince 2 project management. This is a case of, I've been doing this. I just didn't use those terms. I just didn't call it that. So you might have more experience than you realize. So I see the majority of folks have some exposure. They know some of the terms. 24% of you, you've taken the class. And then some of you, 21%, you are already Agile certified. So I would presume that you're here because you want to find out, is there more? What should I be thinking about? So here's another question for you, because I want to know what you know. What Agile certifications have you heard of? And Shavian or Akin, if there are people putting in the chat, I'd love to hear what some of those folks are putting in there. Okay, ACP, Scaled Agile, Scrum. So which Scrum? PSM, CSM. Okay, I see you all putting in there. DSDM, Agile PM. So DSDM, for those of you, is dynamic systems development method. So that is very specific in the software industry. CSM, Kanban. Okay, this is making me feel great because no one's putting anything in here where I'm like, that's not on my list to talk about today. So this is good. And I'm surprised actually by Scrum at Scale. Okay, I have heard of that one. Scaled Agile, I see. Agile, I love it. So if no one's heard about that one, that is Waterfall and Agile. It's not a certification, although wait for it. It might be coming up. Usually we tend to call that one hybrid project management, when it's a combination of traditional Waterfall with Agile. All right, this is awesome. You all are making me feel super pumped about the next set of slides, because I have yet to see anyone throw in a certification that is not what I'm going to be talking about. So that's great. Last question, truth or lie? So I'll give you a few moments. First one, PMI ACP credentials going away. Is that truth or lie? Agile certifications make sense only if you work in software development. Truth or lie? And there are 200 plus Agile certifications in the world. Truth or lie? So I see the results coming in. You should be able to see the results. What are people thinking? So a little bit of bias here. You're like, oh, everybody's saying this. Give it a couple more seconds. So I think on average, I think we've had about 40 people answering the questions. All right, 5 seconds, answers in. Let me post up the results. All right, so the X indicates that's a lie. The check mark indicates that is a truth. The PMI ACP credential, as of right now, is not going away. I know, well, it seems like with all these other credentials that we've heard of, it's still a solid, valid credential. And we'll talk a little bit about that later on. Agile certifications can be applied to any industry. We're seeing the value of what Agile can do in healthcare, in education, sometimes even in the building of construction projects. So Agile certifications, Agile techniques and practices can be applied in just about any industry. It's about, does it make sense for the specific project needs? That's the distinction there. And then big truth, at last count, and one of the people I'm going to recommend you follow, at last count, there are at around 270 Agile certifications. In our world of traditional project management, we know of kind of like the gold standards, right? You've got the PMP, the Prince 2. We are familiar that that's going to be your gold standard from a recognized credential standpoint. But when it comes to Agile certifications, it's pretty mind-boggling. You're not sure. And, I had a previous slide where I talked about the wild, wild west, and I have to know your audience, but it kind of is the wild, wild west. If you are familiar with, Western movies or the hinterlands, it's kind of the no man's land. You are confused. You're not sure which way to go. People, kind of feels like a little bit of lawlessness. So that's where I want to kind of help bridge the gaps, if you will, in your understanding of what makes sense. And just as a quick disclaimer for you, this is coming from my viewpoint as an American in the East Coast, with largely the certifications that I'm going to be reviewing is US-based certifications that have a global influence. Now, for those of you who are in, the EMEA, APAC regions, I know that there's a lot of global teams and global projects that are happening where you are working with folks who have these certifications. So as kind of a encouragement for you, don't feel like, these are only limited to these certain certifications, because the guidance that I'm going to provide for you can be valid in your assessment of certifications in your parts of the world as well. So that's just kind of what I want to provide for you as we move forward in this. So the question, Crystal, which Agile certification should I get? Without asking any more details, I say two things, either one of these or both of them. Well, what does everybody else in your organization have? It just makes sense for you all to speak the same language. I know oftentimes people will want to kind of be different, but it's not going to necessarily help you or be helpful if you are focused on a different certification and everybody else has their own certification and we're not speaking the same language. Again, that's the beauty of what I find from the traditional project management standpoint of the PMP or Prince 2. We're all talking the same language. So just without doing any further assessment of your hopes and dreams and desires, what does everybody else in your organization have? It just makes sense to speak the same language. Now, this is coming from a perspective, if you're already in the organization, that's my initial guidance for you. If you're coming from the standpoint of, well, Crystal, I'm looking for a job, which certification should I get? Well, I'm going to pause on that for just a moment, because I also have some kind of standard guidance that I would provide for you. Now, in full transparency, it probably would help if you've found out about my journey and getting the 2 certifications of the PMI ACP and the Certified Scrum Master from the Scrum Alliance. My journey, it wasn't so crystal clear. Get it? So this is a case of, as an instructor, I found that people were asking me these questions. I said, you know what? In all fairness, let me do my due diligence and I'm going to get those certifications. Turns out with the PMI ACP, I have the work experience. So the PMI ACP does require that you demonstrate having work experience working with Agile methodologies and techniques. I discovered as I went through training, it's not required, but I went through training. I've been doing Agile, just have been using those terms per se, but there was, meetings that we were having, techniques that we were implementing. And I found that exam to kind of be around the same terrain as the PMP exam. And I'll just stick with that credential from a comparison in terms of preparation. It's a closed book exam. It was stressful. If you remember your experience with the PMP exam, it was all of those things. And it was making sure that you understand the PMI way of better practice from that standpoint. But even though I had my ACP, I still was getting the question of the CSM, the Certified Scrum Master. And I'm like, let me find out what this is about. I have to say it was a great experience for me from an instructor standpoint. Loved my instructor. He actually comes from the education space in the pre-K through high school. So it was great from that perspective of getting an understanding that he wasn't just coming from IT or software development, the way we think about these certifications. But I also found that after getting the CSM, it made me appreciate my ACP credential that much more because of the in-depth review that's required in order to pass the ACP exam. So that's just kind of my journey there. I wish I could say I did all the things I'm getting ready to tell you about. Well, does my organization need it? Are jobs asking for it? It was more of market analysis and more of making sure that I have that understanding for myself from a professional development of getting those credentials. But today, what I have realized, and as I've implemented, as Xavion talked about, I'm an Agile convert. What I've realized is that being Agile, not doing it, but being Agile is a daily habit of putting it into practice. It's not just based on certification only. And this is where just a quick, because I can't help myself, I'm such a nerd, just a quick kind of recap about where Agile comes from and what it's all about. And for those of you who have ever, looked at, have seen this diagram, Agile is a mindset. So again, it's not about just doing Agile, it's about being Agile. Do you have the mindset of recognizing where it's appropriate? And this mindset is defined by 4 paired values, guided by 12 principles, and it's manifested by many practices. So when we talk about practices, it was the things that you all threw out in that previous slide about Scrum, Kanban, DSDM. Those are examples of the practices of Agile. So I know sometimes there's this debate about, Scrum is Agile, Agile is Scrum. Agile is the mindset defined by 4 paired values, right? So individuals and interactions over processes and tools. It is working software over comprehensive documentation. It is customer collaboration over contract negotiations. It is responding to change over following a plan. Saying those things helps you get into the mindset. And when you think about the 12 principles, and I'm not going to go through that list, the highlights, and this is what I do in my PMP classes, and I'll talk about, the relationship of PMP and Agile in today's exam world. The highlights of those 12 principles, things like self-organizing teams, simplicity, working software is the measure of progress, not having all these documents dotted, the I's dotted and the T's crossed. You still do documentation. I just want to have that little caveat there. But it's not the comprehensive documentation that we're used to. Really, the measure of progress should be, is the software working? Is the solution working? It's about welcoming change. It's about having business people and developers working every day. And my most favorite, it's about making sure that the team is fine-tuning and adjusting and reflecting on how they're doing. Something that we can also learn a lot about in our traditional projects, that lessons learned conversation, we need to make sure that we're having that lessons learned conversation so that we can fine tune and adjust. Those are around those principles. And when you keep those ideas in mind, and the 4 paired values and the 12 principles are in what's called the Agile Manifesto. So if you've taken any class, you should be very familiar with that. And those all relate back to having the right mindset. By having the right mindset, I'm going to challenge you all of asking less about which certification, but really asking which practice is going to be appropriate for the situation of the project, the organization, the jobs, perhaps, that they're asking for. But practitioners, and I purposely bolded that, practitioners, people who are implementing, are selecting the appropriate practice to meet the needs of their projects. And when you're selecting the right practice, then that will help guide you in the right certification. Because there's so many certifications out there, just saying which certification might be way too much, but maybe, what is going to be the best practice for me to utilize and be successful in my Agile pursuits? Because what I'm finding with all of these certifications, there's a chase now. We're chasing the certifications. And then when we get the certification, we say, therefore I am. And I want to say, are you, with the mindset in tow, being Agile versus having the certification to do Agile? Because I'll just be, from my perspective, chasing that certification actually puts us in that violation of that very first paired value. We're more focused on processes and tools, i.e. certification, over the fact that we should be putting the emphasis on interactions and individuals. So with that in mind, which practice, i.e. which certification? It depends. It depends on the industry you're in. Sometimes the industries have a guiding preference of certification. So take that to heart. Maybe if you're in your organization, what does the organization need? What is going to be the most applicable practice that makes sense? Do you need to scale? Scaling is from a perspective, is this going to be at the program level or portfolio level? Does the certification resonate with your values? There are some certifications that I look at, I'm not doing that. That does not make sense to me. It's just too complex. That's not what I'm about. I want to keep it simple. That's one of the 12 principles. Is it something where you need a certification or desire certification because it provides you foundations? Or do you need something that demonstrates that you have experience? And let's face it, these certifications aren't cheap. So what's the renewal process? Is it something that it can be, painful? It's time consuming. Do I have a break in between? And there are some certifications where it's 1 year. I don't know about you, when it comes to renewing stuff, and especially when it comes to like our PMP exam, I can't tell you how many times people call me at the wire. You had 3 years. And they're calling me 60 days before their certification is up for renewal. So that's something that you may want to factor in as well. So with that in mind, and I'm going to kind of pause here for a second. Shavian or Akin, are there any burning questions that you've seen in the chat that I need to answer right now? I'll answer questions that have come up in Mentimeter later, but if there are chat questions, I do want to address those.
No questions in the chat box from my last check.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Well, here are the certifications that keep coming up in my circle. So in my world, and thankfully, these are the ones that you all have mentioned. So we've got the Certified Scrum Master, Professional Scrum Master. No one mentioned Disciplined Agile, but I think it is worth talking about. And plus, this is a PMI event, so let's go ahead and talk about it. PMI ACP, you all talked about, and I also saw Scaled Agile Framework. Now, I think it was the Scrum of Scale, or Scale of Scrum, or Scrum at Scale. Again, over 270 Agile certifications out there, and they all kind of have a little bit of flavoring of that name. It's really going to depend on those things that I talked about. As a way to kind of put them in their respective buckets. I think that may be helpful in providing you guidance. My approach in kind of discerning these certifications is looking at foundations versus is it about you having experience. So let's first talk about the certifications that are more on that foundations level. First one is the Certified Scrum Master. So the provider of that is the Scrum Alliance. This is best for people who are new to the Scrum framework. So this is specifically on your knowledge of the Scrum practice of Agile. So you're going to get an introduction to the Scrum Guide. And the thing about Scrum is that because it is the easiest to implement, because it's not as complex. And I have to kind of walk back on saying easy because some of you are like, no, it's not. But in terms of learning the roles, the tools, the artifacts, the meetings that you have, it's not complex from that standpoint. You get it. Now it's just working with people to get them on your side of implementing some of those practices. But because it's widely used, the most common certification that you probably have seen a lot of people have or achieve is the Certified Scrum Master certification. The requirements to become CSM certified is to attend a 16-hour course. So usually it's split up in 2 days. And it is mandatory to take that course, and you pass an open book, an open internet exam, and to maintain, so the renewal process to maintain that CSM is that you achieve 20, what they call Scrum education units. So SEUs every 2 years. Now, there's always this great debate that people also come at me with. It's about the PSM. So that's the Professional Scrum Master, and particularly the PSM1. So if you're going to do kind of a Gala apples to Macintosh apples comparison, because they have kind of their different flavoring, but they're still in that foundations. And I know some of you are going to push back and say, no, it's more intermediate. Here's why I put them in foundations, because there's no prerequisite to get the PSM. You don't have to prove or demonstrate you have work experience. You do have to study a little bit more with the PSM, but there isn't that prerequisite of demonstrating that you have work experience. It is an open book exam. The course, like a course, is not required, but it's recommended. And in fact, if you take a course to achieve the PSM, and if you're not successful on the PSM exam, right now, they do allow you to retake it for free. If you just go after the PSM, you only get one attempt at it. So the CSM is much easier to attain, much faster to attain, because it's taking a 2-day course, open book, open internet exam. Pretty much safe to say you should pass, unless, of course, your internet crashes or something of that sort. With the PSM, you need to know where to look in the materials and have a good sense of the content. This credential in particular is valid for life. So it does not require any renewal. Once you pass, it's yours for life. Now, it may help to kind of see the comparison to comparison. This is a little bit small, but you'll have access to copies to these slides later if you want to review. First and foremost, let me just out the gate. A lot of people are like, which one's better? It's a draw when it comes to being recognized. Some people know CSM, some people know PSM. As a hiring manager for me, if I have 2 people who are coming to me, one with the PSM1, one with the CSM, I know that you have, from a foundation standpoint, what I'll be asking you is tell me how you're going to implement what you've learned. Tell me how you have implemented what you learned. So it's not a case of which one is better. One is more challenging to pass, and that would be the PSM1 because of the kind of more, intermediate level of knowledge that they want you to have. But that intermediate level is about studying. You do need to prepare for it. There's plenty of exam prep books out there for it. With the CSM, the passing score, they did bump it up. It used to be 69%. It's now 74%. And they have now included a time limit. You do have an hour, I believe, to complete the questions. And I took this exam in 2020. And I know it was timed. I don't seem to recall it was an hour. So I think they keep kind of changing it from a validity standpoint of the exam. Straight multiple choice question on the CSM. With the PSM1, and that's offered by scrum.org. So they're kind of competitors. Well, they are competitors, but the story goes is that they used to work together, the founders, and now they kind of split off. So if that's history, that helps you from that standpoint. But 80 questions with a 60-minute time limit. This is where the passing score is at 85%. Generally speaking, you only get one shot with this exam. If you have taken a course, they do give you an opportunity to retake the exam for free. So that's just kind of their way. You know, each one has their kind of their own little like flavoring, and that's why I give that apples to green apples to red apples kind of comparison. Course is optional with the PSM. You don't need to take it, but just know what you're giving up is that you get that one attempt. I have seen in some of the research that they might let you take the exam again, but of course, for a fee. Neither one of them require that you have any kind of prerequisites of courses or work experience. So again, that's why I put both of those in the foundations perspective. You're going to learn a little bit more from the PSM, or you'll need to know a lot more, and that's why it's kind of more in the intermediate level of knowledge, but not necessarily the intermediate level of experience. I'm just doing my pause just to see if there are questions, because this one tends to have a lot of questions coming up. Last one in this grouping is about the disciplined Agile Scrum Master. So this is a new product that comes from PMI. This is where again, best for people learning about fundamentals of Agile and Lean. So with DASM aspirants, this is where you're exploring multiple Agile and Lean techniques. So everything from SAFe, something that we'll touch on, Kanban, Scrum. And what you're doing is learning how to apply the Disciplined Agile Toolkit so that you can discover the most effective ways of working. So if you've been paying attention to PMI's talent triangle, you've noticed that they've changed from technical project management to talk about the ways of working. So you see kind of that complement that they're trying to provide there. This certification requires an annual renewal as long as you maintain 7 PDUs. And I would imagine if you take, an Agile course, a general project management course, but more than likely more of an Agile course, value systems thinking, value Lean thinking, those courses would qualify in that 7 PDU requirement. So that's called the Disciplined Agile Scrum Master. So those 3 are kind of the ones I wanted to highlight for you. What you've seen is kind of they have their different flavoring, different renewal process. And what I want to challenge you is to think about, well, would this be applicable? Would this be helpful for my organization? Or maybe another question to ask is this something that I've seen that's being asked on job applications? So far, kind of a quick question, post check for you. What are your thoughts? Go ahead and put in the Mentimeter. Kind of, what are your thoughts? What are you thinking about? All right. Keep going. I'm intrigued. All right. I already knew this stuff. I'm cool with that. I got some smarties in here. And maybe this is a case of, well, everybody's a smarty. But this is a case of, for those of you with that experience, maybe this is going to give you some guidance as you mentor folks in their Agile journey. So people are like, I'm intrigued. A couple more seconds, because I know that we have like around, again, on average, about 40 folks or so answering these questions. Groovy, groovy. Let's talk about the certifications from an experience standpoint. So knowing that some of you already have your, what's the difference between PMI, ACP, and Disciplined Agile? Get out of my head. I'm right there with you. So let's talk about that from the perspective of experience. So with the PMI ACP credential, this is a case of, this is another Project Management Institute product. This is where it's deepening your knowledge of various Agile. So it is Agile agnostic, right? Or framework agnostic. It's not just about Scrum. You're going to touch on Kanban, Lean, extreme programming, test-driven development, DSDM. Why I put this in the experience is that you do need to demonstrate that you have Agile experience. You need to submit an application for PMI to approve. And this is where their audit around your experience, their audit rate has been a little bit higher than the audit rate for the PMP. So they want to make sure that you have that experience. This is a closed book exam. You have 3 hours to pass. And then after you achieve the PMI ACP, you earn 30 PDUs every 3 years. And it does have a fee with that. I think in general, if you're a member of PMI, it's that general recertification fee. Mine is coming up, so I have to double check now. I think it might be a nominal fee. I would say less than $100 to renew that, but I believe it might be rolled up into that $150 if you're not a member and $60 if you are a member. I have to double check that. I just saw that flash. I missed that. If you want to put that in the comment again about the PMI ACP. So sorry, I missed that one. Or if you want to put it in the questions in the Mentimeter itself. All right. So anytime you don't see me answering a question and you put it in that little flashy thing, that's the case. It goes away. So if you want me to answer that question, please feel free to make sure that you put that. Can you please elaborate the Agile practices most used within the healthcare industry? Oh, that's definitely a question that I am going to have to answer at the end. That's a good question. And there's no like set answer around that one. I'm surprised that some of my healthcare people even recognize Agile. So that's the case. And it just depends on what part of the world you're in as well. I think what might help, and this is a question that actually did kind of come up, and this comes straight from PMI, is kind of the track record. So this might help you in understanding experience from PMI's lens of their Agile products. They kind of put, and notice how the Discipline Agile Scrum Master is kind of like still in the beginning, right? Whereas PMI ACP is where you want general knowledge of Agile practices, but they both flow into a more experienced certification called the Discipline Agile Senior Scrum Master. So what their guidance is that you'll get more and more experience after achieving the ACP, after achieving the DASM, and then that will position you to go after the Senior Scrum Master of the Discipline Agile track. When you have that experience, now you're going to think about, well, what is it that I want to do? Do I want to lead the Agile transformation, or do I want to be more of a coach? That's something I didn't even touch on, because you can actually be a coach, and that's a different kind of track that some people really like to have in their organizations, is someone to help them kind of understand these concepts and make sure we're doing it right, versus being the one who's rolling up their sleeves and actually leading the transformation. So this might be something that's helpful for you. It's on the PMI site. If you kind of want this as guidance for you, is what direction? Because this is where, for some of you, when you're trying to figure out what certification, what's going to kind of resonate with what I want to provide. And remember, the Discipline Agile, I think that was a question that popped up, is about looking at everything from Agile and Lean principles and figuring out the ways of working, the most effective way of working in the organization, versus saying it's Scrum and only Scrum, and this is what we're implementing. This gets into Scrum, Lean, Kanban, and Safe. So that might be something that really resonates with you, that gives you a broader perspective. Now let's go back to PSM. There's a PSM2 and a PSM3. When you attempt the PSM1, or when you're attempting, I should say, PSM2, what their stance is that you should have advanced Scrum knowledge and be an in-depth Scrum Master in terms of experience and implementation. So by earning the PSM 2 and 3, it's the expectation that not only have you completed the previous certifications, but you also have put them in practice. And that's why these are in that category of experience. It's not a requirement, nor they don't require that you submit an application, unlike the ACP certification. But in order for you to be successful, these are the things that you probably should have in place. So if you really appreciate the Scrum framework, and more so, even more so, the scrum.org's kind of philosophy, and with these certifications, they don't require, each one, they don't require that you renew. That might be around your philosophy from a time standpoint, as well as, I don't need to renew this. I've proven that I have this experience. But wait, there's more. You can do a whole host of certifications within the scrum.org family. So with their certifications, and I saw you all point them out, you've got the professional Scrum product owner. I saw someone put in the PAL, professional Agile leadership. So it's really about, is this a framework that really resonates with me? You actually get to see what I had for dinner last night too. Is this a framework that really resonates with me and my values and what I think will be effective for the organization? Same thing with the Scrum Alliance and their suite of certifications. Is the track that you want to stay in the Scrum Master track, where you're the facilitator of people implementing processes? You're that servant leader. Is it more that you are on that business side of things? So you'll see you have the track in the middle there, the product owner track. So you can get the certified Scrum product owner, advanced certified Scrum product owner. Or are you more around the team developer? So that developer track, where it's valuable for you to also have the Agile knowledge. So there's a lot, and I'm only scratching the surface. Let's talk about scaling. And you might be thinking, well, what does that mean, Crystal? What's scaling? Well, the techniques and the guidance of these certifications that I've talked about, they're really popular from a standpoint of implementing them at the individual team level. But for some of you, you need to implement Agile at the organization, enterprise level, so at the program or portfolio level. So this is where scaling frameworks have come into play, where it has allowed teams to add better coordination. So for those of you that are on this call that are more at that program or portfolio level, it may be worthwhile to explore those certifications that provide you the guidance and kind of the techniques to help you scale your Agile efforts at that enterprise level. Kind of 3 certifications. So I picked not necessarily the practices, but the certifications, because this is what this is about, that keep coming up. Scaled Agile Framework, in short called SAFe. LESS, which is large scale Scrum. And so with the large scale Scrum, their focus is to extend the Scrum practice and the core principles of Scrum so that we can implement it enterprise-wide. And then the question came up earlier about disciplined Agile. So you saw how disciplined Agile and PMI ACP can kind of coordinate or reflect each other. But you can also see how disciplined Agile is something that they also see as something that can be applied around scaling your Agile practices or scaling Agile within your enterprise. Now, the one that I'm really going to focus on is the SAFe framework. And with the SAFe framework, Scaled Agile Framework, the provider is Scaled Agile Inc. This is great for leaders who want to organize multiple teams successfully using Agile methodologies. So SAFe focuses on having detailed practices and roles and activities, either at the portfolio level, program level, as well as the team levels. This one does require an annual renewal of the certification. And at last count, there are 14 different SAFe certifications. Right? So you would need to do your due diligence. What I will say from the US perspective, our US federal contracts, government agencies, there's more of that focus. I've seen a lot more safe requirements, safe certification requirements. Sometimes I'll see less pop in there, but a lot of times I've seen the desire is that teams have the safe certification. So depending on your skill level, your focus, your expertise, that will help you to determine which ones of those safe certifications would make sense. So let me kind of wrap this up for you around that. What may help in your journey in figuring out the best certification for you? What's the best practice you want to implement is, number one, find a mentor or find mentors, what I lovingly call my board of directors. And if you're asking for a mentor, I would say nowadays, be a little bit specific about what you're requesting in the mentorship. Hey, I would love for you to be my mentor for 3 months to help me determine the best certification for me in my career journey. That helps a person to be able to assess if they can provide the time and if they can help you. If you just blindly say, I need a mentor, can you be my mentor? I don't know if I can be as Johnny on the spot and being, yes, I'll be your mentor. So that's something, if you want more of that one-on-one interaction, be as specific as possible. Or alternatively, follow mentors on social media. I can't tell you how many mentors I have on social media, and they don't know I'm stalking them. I mean, following them. This is a case of when they're active on social media, they are active on blogs. It doesn't have to be social media. They're active with their blogs, and they're just producing all this great content. I highly recommend that. And then when you're ready to reach out, you know them. You know their content, and they'll probably be more apt to provide you, if not maybe a long-term relationship, they're maybe more willing to provide you an hour of their time. Get the experience. Integrate Agile in your job. Volunteer. And there are organizations that are looking for project managers, and you don't have to tell them, well, can I implement Agile or Scrum? Just do it. They're looking for project managers to do what you do best, and that's getting stuff done. And if you find, in terms of being Agile, that in this instance, I think implementing some Agile techniques would be helpful, do it. And do your due diligence. What are jobs asking for? That was partly why another push for me to go after the PMI ACP is that I saw when I was looking at jobs, they were looking for PMI ACP. Now, or they would say PMI ACP or CSM, which we just saw, they're kind of different. What does your company need in terms of practice, which will then help influence you from a certification standpoint? What does your project need? Maybe there are courses that you can take to get you set up for success before going into that certification route. I will say that I do recommend, and I'm going to kind of fly by these slides as we kind of wrap up our time together, is listen to my podcast. This podcast episode with Carlo Nino, oh my gosh, it was so fun. Four-part episode podcast where he has 5 Agile certifications, and you are going to be tickled pink when you find out from him why he achieved each one of those, because I was cracking up. Another podcast episode, this is 3 parts, is with my friend and fellow trainer, Ordana Sargent. And if you don't follow her on Instagram, I highly recommend that you do. She's, especially for those of you that are new into the Agile world, she provides so many awesome gems about getting your feet wet. And we talk about a day in the life of a Scrum Master. And it was a conversation with my girlfriend. So you're going to feel like I'm a fly in the wall with this conversation. We had a lot of fun talking about conferences you should attend, books you should read, and things you should do to amp up your skills in Agile. And I'm gonna get a little nerdy here because there are some books I do recommend. Just from a textbook. So if you're just like, I just want a textbook reference, the Agile Practice Guide. And if you are a member of PMI, which I hope you are, you get free access to the e-copy of the Agile Practice Guide. And the only other one that I'm going to mention is the one in the middle. And I don't normally like kind of the For Dummies books, but this author, and he's a CSM, he's a Scrum trainer, Mark Layton. he does such a phenomenal job of breaking it down in the simplest, layman's terms understanding, and it comes with pictures and it gives you examples. So things like agile estimating kind of makes you weird. He breaks it down. If, just what should the product owner do versus the scrum master? He really breaks it down. There's, of course, here are the roles, but he really gives you, here's the kind of real life application of those roles. For those of you who are looking for more of having the right mindset, the two I'm going to highlight here, the middle and the last one, just for interest of time. When I had that conversation with Carlo Nino, he mentioned this book by Jeff Sutherland, The Scrum, The Art of Doing Twice the Work in Half the Time. I've recommended this book to like 5 people up to this point after Carlo recommended it to me. And we all like, this book is a page turner. When Carlo said that to me, I'm like, seriously? A project management book? It is a page turner. And this is a book that I reference often. This is a book that I've, developed a training just from a foundations training behind so that people have a good understanding of these concepts. And then just some books for fun. If you're a visual learner, the far book on the right side, this is a great picture visual book if you just want to kind of have that understanding of Agile. And then the book on the far left, Scrum, a breathtakingly brief and Agile introduction. That book will literally take you about 10 minutes to read. It just gives you the basics. I mean, I think it's like 1 sentences per page. I think it's probably, download electronically and you'll be fine, unless you just want to have that book in your hand. So before we kind of close and get into our closing and after talk, I do want to mention, and Shavian, if you don't mind kind of putting in the chat the websites, I do recommend, so when you go back to these slides later, I do recommend some people to follow. Lisa Adkins and Jonathan Cassell-Fell. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. I was looking on LinkedIn, how you can tell people how to pronounce your name. They've worked together in terms of the Agile Coaching Institute, and they've created this framework in helping you understand kind of the skill sets and the expertise if coaching is the way that you want to go. Jonathan in particular is based in the UK. Diana Larson, I put her in that category of one of the godmothers. So if you are familiar with the Agile Manifesto, you know that it was 17 software developers, all men. Well, Diana's been in the game for some time as well. And I just love any presentation that she does. And she's written a book, Lead Without Blame. And I know that, especially when we talk about the daily scrum or the daily stand-up that we have, it feels like it's a blame session. She gets into the heart of, we want to lead our Agile transformations without putting blame on people. That can lead to burnout, can lead to attrition issues. And then in the UK, one of my current favorites is Chris Stone. He lists himself as the virtual Agile coach. And in fact, and I'm not going to bring it up, but Shavian, if you could also put that link in the chat, he has a mural board where he made an extension of that Agile coaching framework that I mentioned that Lisa and Jonathan created. And he actually mapped over the 200 plus Agile certifications against that framework. So if you're trying to figure out, is it coaching that I want to do? Is it having a mastery? Is it being a facilitator? He maps from his perspective of the certifications that fall in that framework. So I do recommend that you give that a shout and give that a look. And then he actually maps books. And I think this comes from people who recommend the books in that framework. So he's done an extensive job in really helping people understand the various Agile certifications. So he's gone a step further. The one podcast I'm going to mention from this slide is your Daily Scrum. This is from Agile for Humans. These two guys, and they are men, they have just about every day a daily Scrum conversation about your pain points in implementing Scrum. Should you have, can you add more to the backlog as a part of your sprint goal conversation? And they get into that level of detail. If you have a specific question, they're going to answer it. And they have it on YouTube and they have it as a podcast. And then I have some websites or blogs to follow. So I think these are great. And one of the books that are the fun books is the Fun Retrospectives. Well, they actually have a website where they list all these retrospective ideas. So I think that is great for you. I'd love to hear from you all, because it's not about what I think, because this is part of the engagement. What books, what resources do you all think are valuable for others to know about? So I'm going to give you an opportunity to write in there, and then I know we have to close out. There's a lot.
Meantime, while people are writing their resources, do you want to answer some of the questions that came through?
Yeah. Do you see the questions?
So some of them were written in the chat. So I can give you the
Okay.
ones that were written in the chat. And I know Akin and I have been like tracking some.
Cool.
Like there was one, is PMP ACP the only qualification or certification that specifically supports project management in agile organizations?
Is the PMI ACP the only one?
Yeah, that specifically supports.
I think the answer is no. I mean, it's one of many. So that might have been a question that came up earlier that hopefully I've answered that question for you. I love what someone just said in the resources. The Agile Manifesto, that's step number one. I absolutely agree. It's a good place to start. Yes, Peter Taylor, the lazy project manager, and he's also talking, becoming a leader and talking about artificial intelligence. At first, artificial intelligence, I'm like, that's just whatever, I don't get it. And then Chat GPT has entered into the mix. And now I'm like, I get it now. So that is, I would definitely say he's someone to follow, particularly if we're going to be more agile. YouTube University, absolutely. Essential Scrum, a practical guide to the most popular agile process. Awesome. I love it. Follow me on LinkedIn. I would love that. I have my little plug there. Business Agility Podcast by Safe. I love it. So keep those coming. I think you should be able to still answer. So as I advance my slide, you can still answer those questions. But I just want to remind people, especially for those of you that are still working towards the PMP, don't forget, approximately half of the PMP exam represents agile and hybrid concepts. So you will get that experience and that understanding as well. And I do want to close on a quote by Alistair Cockburn, who was one of the folks, the 17 software developers in the creation of the Agile Manifesto. Agile is an attitude, not a technique with boundaries. An attitude has no boundaries. So we wouldn't ask, can I use Agile here? But rather, how would I act in an Agile way here? Or how agile can we be here in this situation? So that is something I want to encourage you to take to heart so that you don't get caught up in chasing certifications per se, because sometimes I've seen that people are like, I got the certification and they didn't want that. They wanted me to get something else. So think about that from that perspective. So I know that we usually have time for reflections. I'm going to see if there are any other questions. And in fact, just in respect for people's time, I am going to stay longer. So we do have an after talk, after party, if you like. So if you have specific questions, I'm happy to stick around another 20 minutes. So that's my bonus to you for me talking a lot. But I definitely would love for you to connect with me, share your aha moments. My favorite playground on social media is LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram, but definitely you'll hear back from me quickly on LinkedIn. So with that, I'm going to stop talking for just a second so we can do our closeout, and then we'll do our after party.
Akin, do you want to take some of the questions? Or there was one that I know you mentioned, Crystal, where someone was asking, it's Jagnish. Can you please elaborate more on Agile in healthcare?
Oh, thank you for asking that, reiterating that question. So there is no set Agile framework. I would say from my experience, the easiest to implement would be the Scrum framework. If you are working on, let's say, some of these electronic health record systems that are at the enterprise level, I've seen where using one of the scaled frameworks like SAFe would be valuable, just so that you can understand the process steps to implement it enterprise-wide. but there isn't one set one in the healthcare arena. And I will go so far as to say they still struggle with traditional project management. It is just like, let's just go, and we'll hope that everything works out in the end, and it has to, because we're talking about patient care. So I've yet to find, just like we struggle with a consistent electronic health record system, we struggle with the consistency in project management methodology from the healthcare standpoint. So I would do some research about, kind of figuring out what are the wins that I can get. And if implementing Scrum can help me get the quicker wins, then maybe that's the way to go. If you find, again, this is more at an enterprise level, you might want to do some research in one of the scaled frameworks, and maybe discipline Agile, for instance, might be the way that you want to go. If you want to look at, the variety of ways versus scaled Agile framework, that framework is one that I probably, unless I am mandated to do, there's a lot to that one. It can be a little bit complex, but I've seen people implement it successfully. I heard of people implement it successfully.
Okay, before we move on with extra questions, Crystal, I just want to thank you for giving us an insightful presentation on Agile certifications. There's a bunch of thank you notes in the chat to you. Thank you, Crystal. Thank you so much. Great presentation. Enjoyed the webinar. Great webinar. But just to deviate a bit for a minute, are you excited for Women in Projects?
I am excited, and I hope people can join.
There. Please come and see Crystal, hear Crystal. There's so many different speakers from all over the world that we're having next Wednesday from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Is it Wednesday? I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Next Wednesday. And again, thank you for today, and everybody else who has to drop off. Enjoy the rest of your day, or whatever time of the day it is, wherever you are. Thank you,
Shavian. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm excited about women in project management, and I'll be talking. I'll do a session on Not Sorry, the unapologetic female leader. So, because this is focused on women in project management, I have a special place in my heart about stop apologizing. So I hope you can attend that, or at least listen to the recording. And this is where I unapologetically talked about my perspective of the Agile certification. This is my perspective, my guidance for you. But like all guidance that you receive from folks, take to heart what really is, from your value standpoint, what makes sense. If you already have a certification, I'm never going to tell you, now that was a bad idea. Take it and run with it now. So what can you learn from it? What can you implement? Because it's less about doing and more about being. And how can those certifications help you be the best Agile practitioner in your organization? So I'm happy to provide anybody with feedback around that. Hopefully I answered the question on the healthcare standpoint. So if you can give me any feedback in the chat, that would be great.
Yeah, I think that's all from the chat box. You might want to go to Menti to get the questions so that we can run with those questions there.
Okay. So as a PMP certified PM, should I still do the Discipline Agile certification? So I think it kind of depends on your when you achieve the PMP. If you achieve the PMP after 2021, you have the Agile experience. I think the question is this required of you in your job? So my husband always says, should is a dangerous word. I would say do a little bit of the research and see if it really resonates with you. If you see, I really like how this is going in terms of the way, selecting the most effective way of working, you might appreciate it. Now, just keep in mind, my understanding with all of the Discipline Agile certifications, they do require an annual renewal. So there is a fee. So when I walk back, knowing that there's a fee for the Discipline Agile, that probably means that there's a separate fee for renewing the PMI ACP certification as well. So in that case, just kind of, what from a time standpoint and a investment standpoint, what makes the most sense? I think it's I think it's a great certification. I just know for me, I'm good. I have the ACP and the CSM. I have a nice foundation. Plus, I have my PMP and I teach to it. So I get those foundations and I get the experience building from doing that. I'll stop there. So hopefully I answered your question. I think you can do a thumbs up in the question if I answered it for you.
Yeah, that would be great. Thumbs up would be good. I think you can go to the next question.
Okay. Is it a bad idea to complete multiple certifications as a PO? I will never say that. It's just kind of up to you. Just know the more certifications you get, that's more time investment and money investment to maintain them. So I have not, had any bad things or bad thoughts about people. I mean, if you want the ABCs after your name, just know that the proof is in the pudding with your implementation of it. I want to know you can implement it. I'm not looking for, as a hiring manager, and if there are hiring managers still on this call, put your, insight. Is it bad to you? But that could be just that one person's perspective. But if you see value in what they can do in helping you build up your knowledge base, absolutely. And certainly the certifications help with getting more continuing education credits with the other certifications that you get. But I will say this again, I'm good with my certifications. I've yet to have a client say, Crystal, can you get this certification to teach my students? Some certifications I do need to get. If I want to teach the CSM, I have to be a certified Scrum trainer, but I don't want to teach the CSM. There are plenty of trainers, qualified trainers out there who can do it. And that's not something that I feel the need. So if you can give me a thumbs up, let me know that I've answered your question, but it's not a bad idea. It's just kind of your own preference around that.
Yeah. Just to buttress that, before you go to the next question, there's a question from John asking, with so many certification schemes, are employers able to differentiate?
So this is where you're going to love the podcast with Carlo Nino. I don't think that they know. I just want to know, can you help me with my Agile transformation? I don't think that employers themselves have the bandwidth to do the research themselves. So they might, get a consultant to do an assessment and say, which certification should we be looking for when we apply or when we have applicants? But they don't know. It's just, I want to know, can you implement this? So the certification is backing up that you have the training, and some of the certifications back up that you have the experience. So, but PSM, CSM, ABC, BBD, EPMD, they're still trying to figure it out themselves. Again, 200 plus certifications out there.
I know.
For my R&B fans, that was. All right, let's go to the next question.
Next question, yeah.
Okay, and this is the last one in the Q&A. So if there are more in the chat, I'm happy to answer. I have a fundamental question here. If I do the PMP, 50-50 predictive and agile, do I still need to get the agile scrum? That is going to be entirely up to the needs of your organization. So even in the PMP exam, it is agile agnostic. So it's not just one specific framework. We touch on Scrum, we touch on Kanban, we touch on XP. So you're going to get a little bit of flavoring. And especially when you review the Agile Practice Guide, which is a reference of the PMP exams, not the book, but a reference of the PMP exam content outline, you'll see that there are other Agile practices that they indicate in that book. So I would say, if you want to delve into a specific framework, it may be beneficial to go a step further. So for instance, if I want to know more about Scrum, I want to get specific about implementing Scrum framework, you can take a course, or if you just want to get the certification, you can do a course to get the certification. So when I say take a course, oh my gosh, LinkedIn Learning, Udemy, Coursera, there are so many courses that you can take to just build up your knowledge. And because you have the PMP, you're getting continuing education credits. So that is something I like. I was cautious about making a comment about this. My only issue with a credential where you don't have to renew is, how do I know that you're keeping up with the latest? That is the crux of certifications. I want my lawyer to renew their certifications. I want my doctor to renew their certifications. So when sometimes people are like, I got my certification, I don't need to renew it. But how do I know that you're keeping up with the latest and greatest? So that's my only thing about that particular organization. I think they're probably one of the top in reducing the barriers to entry and being really good about their diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. I just, from an educational standpoint,
yeah.
I do see the value in having renewal requirements for certifications.
Interesting. I think, in my opinion, it's a bit debatable because if you look at it, would you require people with degrees to go renew their degree certificates?
So not degrees, but certifications.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to have my doctor go back and get a medical degree because I need you to operate on me. You don't have time to go back to 4 years of school.
Yeah.
But with the certification, I need to make sure that you are, because let's be honest, when we go to a physician or any kind of clinician, we kind of like, oh, but this person is board certified. When they're board certified, they do need to get this continuing education credit.
Yeah.
So that's just my, from an educational consultant standpoint, where my stance on that. Not, again, employers don't know. They just, unless they're going to really do that research. I am going to ask you, tell me about your experience with implementing Scrum. Tell me about your experience. How has this certification helped you in implementing successfully or not successfully implementing Scrum in your organization? What lessons have you learned? But it's not, I have this certification and therefore I am.
Yeah. Thank you, Crystal. Just to everyone, I think we still have about 59 people on this call.
Awesome.
The networking session is still there. Is there another question? Okay, I think, yeah. There's no question. So I was just about to say, you can join the networking session. You can meet and interact with people. Like Merv said earlier, there's an opportunity to be the greatest networker of the day, and there's a prize attached to that. You're displaying something, Crystal. You want to sell that?
Do I what?
You want to sell this promo code for?
Yeah, this is just for those that stuck around. So that's my little gift for y'all. And you can, especially if you have friends, you're like, I don't need anything, Crystal, but I have a friend. And this is for any course in my catalog. You can use this just about any course. I know one goes to a separate link. But this is my gift to you for sticking around, and you can share it. It does have an expiration date. But I appreciate you all and your candor. I hope this was helpful for you. And it's not good or bad. And you see all the headache picture of like, there's so many, it just is. So whatever you have, make it work for you. Get that experience, follow people, listen to podcasts, read the books. It's all about your continuing growth and make those certifications work for you. So it's not of what's the best certification. It's what's the best certification for you. And I know you're like, but I don't know. Well, definitely do what you're doing today. Do that research, ask those questions, and follow. There are people out there who you really admire. What certifications do they have? And do you want to put in that investment in time and money around that? And that will help you. Again, for me, I'm done. So if I haven't said that enough, that is where I am pretty much going to stop in my Agile journey.
That's interesting. Yeah. So I think we're in a good place to close today's session. Thank you so much for your time, Crystal. It's been a great and interactive engagement, and I see a lot of response. And please, on the PDU code, please can you, someone is responding saying not active. You need to click on the link.
Okay, I'll make sure it's active for you.